It, we, we,
Welcome,
we,
everyone.
we, we don't need to do introductions because,
No, we are live.
oh,
This is
we are
Future of
live. All
Work
right.
24 hours live. And I'm April Jefferson. And I'll let you uh, introduce yourself.
Right, I'm Francois Nukel,
And my name is Claudia Groß.
and Claudia, it's so great to see you again. I mean, we bump into each other once in a while. We've never actually physically met in person. I mean,
Without knowing it, actually, we met in London, but we didn't realize we were in the same event. Do you remember this? This
you're right.
World Open
Yes.
Space on Open Space? Yes.
Yes, that's right, in London in 2012. Yes, of course, and we didn't know it.
How beautiful is that as
Yeah,
we prepare for this very large open space, exploring unimagined possibilities, and it's very global. We're having people from all over the world, and right here we have people we are online together, but we're all sitting in different countries. I'm in the States.
that's
Um,
right, and I'm still in London.
I'm currently in Frankfurt, but I'm actually living in Egypt. So it would have been 3 different continents as well.
Right.
And it will, next week it will, because then I'm back on the African continent.
wow.
But I tell you something, Claudia. There's something I never told you, or I never had the opportunity to. But the first, because I knew your name a long time before we met online or anything, and I knew you. This was an anecdote that went around. It's like one of these Chinese whispers that gets altered or exaggerated and so on. But the story was, and that you had organized an open space. You had got 5,000 Palestinians and Egyptian or sorry, not Jewish women together in the middle of the desert
That's the story.
in a massive open space for several days,
Yeah.
and while the men were fighting and were at war, these women were loving each other in this open space.
So I
And
think,
it's so
Claudia, we need to
And
dig
I
into that
wow,
a little bit more.
yes,
So
certainly.
is the story true? And
Half of it is
it's
really
half true,
true.
yes.
So it's really like this broken Arab phone exercise, where you send out a message and then at the end of the queue, a totally different message comes up, but part of it remained. Yes. So what I did is, I don't remember the year exactly, but maybe it was 2008. I was invited to facilitate an open space for Palestinian refugee women. So that part is correct. Living in Jordan and in refugee camps in Jordan, and it was planned for the International Women's Day. So 3 days starting from March 8th. And
wow.
I was thrilled, when they called me in September the year before, they were like, "Are you available March 8th?" And I was like, "That's International Women's Day. What are you up to?" And so beautiful opportunity. It wasn't 5,000 women; it was 60, and they were actually in the preparatory time. They were very engaged. They wanted to prepare very well. They were Palestinian women coming from 7 different camps, and they were so annoyed because we didn't share an agenda with them. They were like, "Where's the agenda? We want to prepare." And we were like, "There is no agenda." And they couldn't believe it. They thought we are like whatever, delayed in our preparations or whatever. But the beauty of these 3 days that we spent together is like really this stroke of luck that we are meeting in something called open space. And in the evenings they returned back to their refugee camps, so they came by buses, and it's really like, so we were really opening space for them. And there's so many stories connected to this, how beautiful. And in the closing circle they were exchanging poetry, they were singing, at the end we were dancing. I've never seen this before after.
Wow. Talk about unimagined possibilities.
Well,
Yeah.
I thought at that time,
Wow. That's something where people think is unimaginable, that to be able to create a space like that
Mhm.
for Palestinian
Yeah.
women, people think that's not possible.
No, and I
And
can tell you one story out of this
mhm.
event, maybe, because there was a lady. We had to limit the number of participants, and it was 60. And then after the first day she came, she was like, "Could I please bring my daughter tomorrow? She got just divorced, and in Arab law, you get divorced. So husband would say 3 times that he divorces her, and then she's divorced. This is what happened to her daughter." And so she said, my daughter is going through a major depression. And I think if she would be in that spirit here with all these other women, this would be really fine for her. And so we decided, yes, come, bring her alone. And the lady's name was Scheherazade, like the storyteller of 1001 Night. And so the daughter came along the next day. And what happened then is that there was, by chance, on the agenda of the open space, a session scheduled on marriage counseling in refugee camps. So she joined this one. And in the camp, not in the camp, in the session, there was a lady asking, like, if it wasn't negatively stigmatized to be divorced, who of you would ask for a divorce? And all the ladies were like, me, some with two
Wow.
arms. So this daughter of Sherazad was sitting there and she was like, I have what these ladies are wishing for, so game shifter.
Yeah, it's the unlearning that happens in open space is quite miraculous, and looking at to turn your situation around and think about it differently,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and the
And being in the
breath
right place,
that it gives you. Wow.
whoever comes are the right people. Whatever happens is the only magic that could happen.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow.
So when I heard that story, and obviously it wasn't 5,000 as you say, but I was in awe. I was in awe, and that's how I remembered your name, because somebody who can can unimagine those possibilities
Yeah.
stood very high in my view. Or maybe we should say you weren't unimagining possibilities; you were imagining impossibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know
Wow.
what I love about this title with these unimagined possibilities is, I mean, since I read about the title, my mind is just boggling between it. It's like, wait a moment. I mean, it's unimagined, but the moment it becomes a possibility, there has to be an imagination of it, right? So it's really like
Yes.
unimagined flip possible.
Yes. Yeah.
And then retroactively or retrospectively you can say, wow, who would ever thought that this is possible? But there is a moment of there's a shift in your title or in the theme that you have chosen for this year's open space.
To
Hmm.
me, I find it so beautiful that the question is like, what are you unimagining, right? What
Hmm.
feels too big?
Yeah.
And naming it, putting voice to it, and like speaking it out into the world. And us together as a collective uncovering how
Hmm.
might we uncover possibilities from that? Mhm.
And for me, in the context of work, and I do speak it out, so it's not it's not unspoken, but I do speak it out. But is a world of work without managers,
Mhm.
um, a work of self-organizing without managers. There's so much. I mean, there's no doubt that management has done some good, but if I do feel that it does more harm than good, and now certainly in our current world it's doing more harm than good. So um and really, and this is what I learned, of course, this is what I learned in originally Japan 30 years ago, is enabling the people who are actually doing adding value, creating the work, to be to actually be co-determining what's their workspace, and what they produce, and in some parts of the world and in certain organizations that is already an imagined possibility, that is already a reality, but it's far and few between. When you look at mainstream, it's really far and few between, and this is really what I'd like to imagine or unimagine as a possibility
Yeah.
in the near future.
Mm.
So, Francois, speak a little bit more for people who are unfamiliar with like self-management and what that could look like in organizations. Could
uh,
you help them imagine what that what that looks like.
Yeah, well, it's basically the ability. It's the ability of a group of people, or a group in its smaller context, and in an organization in a bigger context, to self over to organize themselves without the need of somebody to give directions. Um, there may be a need sometimes for somebody who does a little bit of coordination, but the coordination doesn't is not determining, and should always be in service, in service of the people. Really, it's a bit like cultivating your garden. You don't want to force and sort of command, like in a command and control, this flower you grow today and you grow tomorrow, and things like that. And in nature that doesn't work. I mean, we know in nature it's not that kind of work. But rather, so cultivating the soil, cultivating so that people can flourish. And I do think there's a need for people who cultivate. Just leaving things on their own will produce lots of good things, but there is sort of a need for some kind of need to cultivate, but not to determine, and that and the cultivation should always be in service of the people who are actually adding value in a business context, at least.
Yeah, and the fact is there are companies doing it. It's
Yeah.
not something new. It's something old. Uh, as our young Francois has said, he's been doing this work for a long time, and that it is possible. People have been doing
Yes.
it in different countries. You see it in societies. Uh, Doing that. Open space have been used in unique ways. I had a one of friends who co-facilitated future work with me last year, and he talked about some of the work he did for like communities, you know, um, figuring out and solving problems for themselves. That even though they were not well off and poor and relied on other people helping, that they could do something as well, and figuring out how what could they do, what do they have. They have certain skill sets, right? We don't have to pay for a cook because we can cook for these students, for example.
Mhm.
And that's it's what self-management gives you is that co-ownership, and that's something I think is wonderful. And and in Claudia's story about, I can just I can imagine all the ahas and looking at those women there, and to that to unlearn something, to take on a new mindset. And oh, I wonder, like, if you were to speak to them today,
Mhm.
see what did that gift them.
Yeah. That's actually a nice idea. We could try to contact them. I hope they are not living in the camps anymore, but I think, I mean, they are still very well connected. It would be interesting to hear. I'm pretty sure that everyone took a lot of like um, surprising, transformative learning moments with them. And I mean, that's also what Harrison is saying, right? Be prepared to be surprised.
Right.
And although we are still, it's like still surprising because I mean, we would not imagine this kind of whatever miracles or yeah, possibilities.
So, which open space principle do you connect with the most, Claudia?
Um, I think all of them, I see them like a shoebox, like really
Mhm.
like I never did this, but I always thought it would be a cool idea to put them into a carton, a box, and then to print them in this, and then just to let one wall and the next wall and the next wall and the next wall fall until the space is really open. And then in the center, there would be the fifth principle about wherever it happens is the only place where it could have. And
Mm.
maybe, I mean, this principle means a lot to me because Harrison created it based on a conversation I had with him, and of course, magically inspired by Tahrir, what happened on the Tahrir Square in Cairo in the beginning January and February of 2011, which is 11 years ago. It was the revolution, and I know that Harrison was like watching it closely, and what was unfolding there for 18 days in his perception was an open space. And then he realized that it's not just the four principles that we knew, but also like wherever it happens is the right place. And it was not just about Midan Tahrir, it was also about, you remember the Occupy movement. So there were a couple of things happening suddenly in all the places. And this is where the fifth principle came from. And some people don't even know about it, but I mean, like, I happen to know the history of it. So yeah, this would be my favorite.
Yeah. How about you, Francois?
Well, whatever happens is the only thing that could have. But probably the most is probably the core. The core. All the others are variations of that, in a sort of way. But for me, the most important part is actually the law of 2 feet, because that's what actually makes open stage what it is, and enables. And we should have the law of open space, even sorry, the law of 2 feet, even where we don't have an open space event. That should be, we should be applying that across across a workspace. So
In meetings,
if you,
yeah.
exactly, if you're in a meeting, if you've got a boss that tells you something that you don't want, then you use your law of 2 feet.
Yeah.
So for me, the law of 2 feet or the law of mobility, is really the center, the centerpiece around everything.
Hmm.
And for
Yeah.
me, it's relevant in meetings, when I just ask participants in workshops or something to take care of their own energy. And if I tell them, please, I mean, stand up, walk around, stretch, do whatever you need, to be really present here in the time with us. And they are like, really like, huh? How come, teacher is now allowing me to do something where I think there's a couple of nuts to crack, but it's also based on what you just mentioned, the law of mobility, the law of 2 feet, or simply to follow your your own learning and honor others with your presence. Yeah. What about you,
Yeah.
April?
Um, for me, the essence of all the principles is the law of mobility, is which I prefer to to use that terminology, and I walked away from using the law of for her as 2 feet, because not everyone has 2 feet, and what the essence of it is really mobility. And as I invest in it and practice it, and for me, open space is a way of life, it's a mindset, and in all things, I try to walk in mobility. And I've learned that it's more than physical mobility, as you were speaking about earlier, Claudia. It's the emotional, mental, um, and it keeps revealing other modes of mobility um, uh, to me. And what a joy! It's freeing. What that mobility is freedom,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
So one of the features of open space is it actually enables a mind shift, shift, or a paradigm shift, or a shift in mind without a lot of learning. You can put people into an open space and without having to pre-teach them, because there are a lot of methods out there that are focused on culture change and doing this and doing that and so on, and all kinds of programs. So this just, you just put them in a room and just give them a few principles, and it shifts their minds, at least for the time they're there.
Yes.
It doesn't always, unfortunately, carry over to back to their working lives. Although the experience that they have sometimes, or very often, often does, because it's in a way it's mind blowing. So it creates. Yeah, but one of the things I also want to mention, because Claudia is here, and one of the things you specialize you really you're really working on one of the conditions, as I see it, one of the conditions for the paradigm shift to happen. These kind of paradigm shifts are certain attributes have to be in place, and one of them is the language we use, because the language that we use constantly reinforce the way we look at the world. Language, in my view, is not simply a code to where you've got reality out there and you've got a code here. That's totally not what language is. It's very much a thinking tool of how you actually view the world, how you actually look at things, and depending on the language that we use. It totally changes the way you look at the world, or the way you look at situations, or whatever it is. And I'm really looking forward to the book you've written, which isn't, I'm not sure where it's at now. But anyways, I know that you this is one of uh,
Hmm.
your areas that you've done a lot of work on. I just want
Yeah.
to say that. Maybe you want to comment on that.
Certainly, I can. I mean, like, yes, I. The thing is, I have a high sensitivity for language, and then I discovered, that there's so many things that we are mentioning in the way we used to say it, that are actually not um, as evolved as our consciousness. So we are stuck in a very old language, and sometimes it's just charming. I mean, like things like whatever sunrise. Okay, we now know that it's not the sun that is rising. Doesn't matter, but some things really matter. I mean, like, why are we still until today focusing on no war when we know that our brains don't understand the word no? So I mean, why are we not focusing on peace? And I've seen this once in an exhibition of Pablo Picasso. He said the same 100 years ago. So why are we not rallying for peace? This is just a very basic example. And when I think about work or the future of work, I have been surprised that even authors or management gurus and then companies and NGOs and everyone alike is still using that old language where they are all about to create something really new and innovative. So why do they all have officers? Why would you use military language in your startup? I don't get it. I'm
Right.
like a front desk officer. You have a front. Is there war going on? Or
Mm,
headquarters, or these things, or machine language, human resources. I mean, many people are waking up to this and they're now changing it.
yeah.
But there's so much more to be done. And I just also find it interesting when people think that the opposite of top down is bottom up. No, it's not the opposite. I mean, the opposite would
Mm,
be inside in and outside, also inside out and
yeah.
outside in. Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
opposite. But top down, bottom up, that's the same. That's the same principle. Still pyramids.
Yeah. It's miraculous how many people still call people resources. And I always say, when they say resources, like, what type of resources? I'm trying to understand. Are you talking about, like, I'm not understanding. Could you be more particular and say what kind of resource? Is it a laptop? What is it? And they were like, finally say people. I'm like, oh, people. Why don't we use people then? Um, uh,
Mm.
and that it matters. Will you say people and use the language of people, then how you engage, how you make decisions, um, are different.
But just if you call your colleagues employees, I mean, so yes, what defines them as an employment contract? While there's so many more beautiful words out there, how you can really express the relationship, and it doesn't need to be oh, we are all family. Very often, this is also just like what a kind of greenwashing, teal washing, whatsoever washing the thing, But it's really about what is the expression, the genuine expression. How are you talking about your colleagues and each other? And also
Mhm.
passive language. When you look at employment handbooks or web pages or something, there's so much passive language. Things are done to people. They are empowered. They are. So how come you empower them? So I have
Yeah.
100% power. Let me share a little bit of power with you out of my big whatever generosity. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And there, Mary Parker Follett, 100 years ago, she spoke about, instead of power over, she spoke about power with. And when I read her book, it was like eating chocolate, and I thought, like, how is this possible? Could someone please have listened to her 100 years ago? We could have been in a totally different state right now. But well, here we are. And we have the open space
and
coming up next week.
and which is a great transition because we are out of our time that we hope to have this. But as we know, the space is always open, and that Future of Work 24 hours is happening next week. And we hope that we can continue the conversation. There's so many goodies out of here to keep diving in and exploring it with us next week. And I thank you all. We are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and we invite you to like, subscribe, share, um, and join us hopefully at Future of Work 24 Hours next week to continue the conversation. Bye, everyone.
See you next week.
See you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.